morning. Hello, everyone. I'm Laura Rogers, and welcome to Power Hour. This is a show that I do Wednesdays at 11 Central. Been doing this for over 8 years. Power Hour is all about things that you can do in Microsoft 365, not being super technical. So a lot of SharePoint, Power Apps, Power Automate, and all those other different little apps that exist as part of the Microsoft 365 suite and geared towards power users. And today's topic, you all voted. I sent out a newsletter the day before. You all voted on the topic of Power Apps form control setting default values. So this is kind of a common concept when you're creating a form and creating a logic in your form, and there needs to be logic based on either certain things having a default value or certain fields and having logic applied to them having a certain default value under a certain condition. So we're going to spend this hour today going over that. So we have a lively chat going on in Teams. If this is your first time joining, welcome. We have underneath where the video, wherever you're watching this video, there's a button with a link to fill out this form to request to join, because we have to manually invite everyone to Teams. So you're going to request to join. And then once you've joined, once you've done that, you only have to do that once. And then you're going to be jumping into the chat in Teams, just in Microsoft Teams on your computer once you get invited. And then you can click your name at the top of Teams and toggle over to where it says IW Mentor Power Hour. And so our company is iwmentor.com. We have hours and hours of training, advanced training on Power Apps, Power Automate, SharePoint, Teams, all these products. So Power Hours are really just kind of very informal. And if you're looking for something that's more of like a pedagogy of here is how to learn this all in the proper order, that's where you would go to check out our training. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with the demo. I'll share my screen here. And I'm going to use a travel request as the example. So in SharePoint, I use the travel request just list template, and I've made a few tweaks to it, but it's mostly just kind of the out-of-the-box list template for travel requests. And I do have a new monitor that's got a bigger resolution, so let me know if you're having problems reading anything, because it might look a little bit different. So, and again, the fun thing about this being live is that we have this lively chat, and you can feel free to ask questions and have discussions as I go. And since we have this topic of default values in Power Apps, I'm kind of curious what other ideas you might have, if you think of anything else as I'm going for some logic you'd want to do to set default values. All right, so I've got a few things that I've written down. I had a few things that this topic was Lisa's idea. She had a couple of things that she suggested. So I'll go ahead and start off so I have this SharePoint list, and I went ahead and created a Power App, just a very simple Power App. And this Power App just has a form and it has a list. So I have the travel requests, and I can create a new travel request, go back, and I can click on an existing travel request, and that's pretty much the whole structure that I have so far. So I haven't done any logic yet. So the first thing that I want to show is I'll go ahead, and since I'm going to be using this status column, I'm going to go ahead and set this status column as read only. So what I can do is, if this is a brand new form, I can just hide the status column. That's not something that anybody needs to see. But when it's an existing form, I can make it so that they can see the status, but they can't change it. So those are the two pieces of logic that I'm going to do first off, because this status is something that I'm going to be using in the logic in a couple of the examples here. So I select my whole card here in my Power App, in my form, and I go to the visible property. And I want the whole card to be hidden if it's a new form. So the logic that I always use to determine if something's a new form or not is if, and I give it the name of the form dot mode equals new. So that would be if it's a new form. then I don't want to see this control. Otherwise, I do. And of course, I could do reverse logic if I wanted to. If it's not new, show it otherwise, you know. So now this is not a new form. I clicked on an existing one to get to this form that I'm on right now. So this is not a new form, so it's not hidden. And then the other thing that I need to do on the card for this one is to go to the display mode. So display mode is where I'm going to tell it to be read only, and read only is the display mode for that is called view. So in order to do, since this is grayed out, I need to go ahead and unlock this card so that I can type something in here. Parent display mode is going to be whatever mode the whole form is in. So I don't need it to be the parent display mode. I'm just going to always, I want this to always be read only. Dot view. So it's always going to be view no matter what. Okay, so I'll go ahead and create a new form, and you can see that there's no status here. Another thing that we want to do that's very simple, that we're not getting into any huge complexity yet, is to set the manager to default to the currently logged in users manager, but we only want to do that if it's a new form. So that's going to also have that same logic of if something is a new form or not. So actually I can go to that one that to that logic that I created already for the view, the visible, and then I can just grab this text right here since I already typed that. And then if it's a new form, I want the manager to be the currently logged in users manager. So what I've done ahead of time is I went ahead and I added a connector for Office 365 users, and that's how you get that information about the logged in manager's user, that data. So then I'm on my manager card, I go to the default property. So the default property of all these cards is always going to have this item dot whatever the name of that column is in SharePoint. And that's what it's going to say. And I can unlock this in order to do logic on this default value. So for this logic, I want to say only if it's a new form, I want to put the logged in users manager. Otherwise, I want it to just be this item dot manager, just be what the value is already in that field. So I'll go if the name of the form dot mode equals new, then. And this is where I'm going to paste this text. Oops. Let's see. And I'll paste that into the chat too. I'll just paste the entire syntax in. Oops. Yeah. No, they're not. You were asking about the geospatial features. No, they're not free. So that is very large, that text that I just pasted in there, but that gives you the idea of what I'm about to paste. And that is assuming that code that I just pasted, that I'm pasting here, assumes that you've already added this connector for Office 365 users. So basically, if it's a new form, then I'm going to get the manager of the logged in user. Otherwise, I'm going to show the manager of just the manager field of something that was already filled in. So all this syntax is looking at, basically, it's looking at the logged in user using this user email thing. And then something that I usually do in apps to make it a little more efficient is in the apps on start. I pretty much do this as a standard in every app. I do set var current user to user. And that way it makes it a little bit more efficient, because anytime I need to look at some piece of data based on the logged in user, I don't have to go multiple times calling this user information, which it just kind of is less hits back to the server. So let me go create a new item. And I can see my little fake manager in my demo here is Garth Fort. And but again, to make that more efficient, what I would do is all these references to the currently logged in user, I would use my var current user that I just created. Var current user dot email. Oh, and I don't have, I have to run my onStart so that there's some data in there. There we go. And then var current user dot email. Var current user dot email. There. So then it's just using what's in the variable. Okay, so that's how you can set something to be a value only if it's a new form. And then another thing that we can do is when it gets more complicated, we're going to start doing something like setting a field value based on some other value in the form. And again, y'all let me know if you can think of some other example of that. The best one I use, and I use all the time, is for the status. So I will say, if the status is currently submitted, then change the status to something else. So right now, let me go to my status column. Let me see if I don't think I've added that. Yeah. Oh, here's my status. I'm hiding it. So I'm hiding my status if it's a new form and I'm currently on a new form. Let me just go to an existing one. So if it's a new form, I do want this to go ahead and have a status of submitted. And you can set the default value of a column in SharePoint in the list settings too. And then as soon as it gets submitted, it would get that default value. But if you need to be able to see the default value before something is submitted, in this case, I'm hiding the status column, but if you need to be able to see it, then you'll be able to, you need to do this logic in the card itself. So for my default property of the status, I'm going to say, if it's a new form, dot mode equals new, then I want this to be submitted. And this is just a text column. Just very, very simple. I don't have to do much anything complicated with it if it's just a text column, not a choice column. So if it's new, it will say submit it. So let me go ahead and, sorry about that. Let me go ahead and do a new one. And we'll take a look at that. So it's pre-populating my manager. I'm going to go to North Carolina. And let's visit. Let's see, put a couple of dates in here. Submit. Okay. So let's see, what is this? So there's my North Carolina, and I click on it. So now you can see that it has my manager filled in and it has the status of submitted. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to have to do is, this is where it gets more complicated, because then the manager is going to go in here. Now there's a lot of, there are a lot of extra things we could potentially go through having to do in an approval process. But this is going to be a very simple approval process. And you see, I did a whole other Power Hour called Approval Panel, where I did like these multiple levels of approval, and I had it in a separate SharePoint list, etc. So there are a lot of different ways to do this, but I'm just doing like a very simple way right now. So what I want to do is have a manager approval field, and have, once the manager has made a decision, then that would actually change this status from submitted to whatever, whatever the manager has done. So it's the manager's turn. And I went ahead and created a column in here called first approval. So you could call it manager approval, whatever your different approval levels are, but I just called it first approval. Lisa said, for the manager field, what's the difference between default and default selected items? Default selected items is when you have a choice column, a combo box where you want to have multiple items selected, multiple managers. In this case, of course, there's just going to be one, but yeah, default selected items has to be used sometimes when dealing with multiple. So I've got my first approval. So first approval is, let's go ahead and add that to my first approval, add it to my form. And then I only want this to be showing when the status is submitted. So let's see, visible. Well, no, I only want it, I just don't want it to show when it's a new form, because then I still want to be able to see it later on, even if they've, filled it in. So again, this is going to be that same concept of having it only show if it's not new. And that's going to be what I did, what I did in this visible property. So what I can do is, since I set this visible property on the status card, which is called this, and to show only if it's not new, I can actually just use the exact, just refer to that same logic. I'm just going to put the name of that other card .visible. So now if this card is visible, this other card's automatically going to be visible. So I don't have to do that same logic over and over. So then the first approval is going to be something that I need to look to see if once it gets submitted and maybe somebody gets an email and they go in here and the manager makes a decision, then once the manager's made a decision, so my logic is then going to be if the status is submitted and this first approval is basically not blank, then change the status to manager approved, or manager, let's see, whatever the manager decides, like approved, rejected, or changes needed. So I can even concatenate whatever they decided onto the name of the status if I want to. But I'm just gonna go ahead and do something pretty simple and say first approval is just going to have a value in it, and then what is my next status going to be? It's going to be VP level. So I could go through this whole naming convention of having deciding what all the statuses need to be. This is usually one of those things you do towards the beginning, is you say, okay, first I'm going to say submitted, and then I'm going to say I want it to be manager approval, VP approval. So and what I could potentially do, especially if I have multiple levels of approval, this one is just one, but then I could start having a naming convention of, instead of it being called submitted when it first gets submitted, have the status be manager approval. And then when the manager approves it, then it goes to VP approval, and VP goes to CEO approval. So that could be, it's up to you in whatever your process is, but that could be what you decide. So I'm going to go ahead and say once the status is submitted and the person makes their first decision, then I'm going to change it to, I'll just say completed. And then that way I'll show you the different ways to do the logic on that update property of the status. So we're only going to update the status if those two conditions apply. So to do that, I go to my status, and I'm not going to mess with the default property. The default property is what people are going to see. That's the word people are going to see in it. I don't want the word to look different. I don't want it to have some other status listed there, because that could confuse end users. So I go to this property called update, and update is where that's where you tell it what data to put in SharePoint when the thing gets submitted. So this is where I'm going to do my logic to change the status. So if and my current status is going to be based on, I always have my var record in place. Let me iterate real quick what the var record is. So to get to this existing item, when I'm on my list here, to get to it, when I click an item here, it's setting this variable. And that's something that I just do as a standard across all apps that I create, is when someone clicks on something in the gallery, it's setting var record to this item, the thing they just clicked on. And then that way, when I'm on the form, anytime I want to reference any of those values, that's where I'm getting that var record. So that is a variable of the whole record of the thing that I'm clicking on. So that var record, let me show you what it looks like. I know that, you know, my regulars, this is something that we talk about all the time and go over all the time as just a standard practice. But this is an entire record that's a variable. So it's got all the data of the thing that I just submitted. So that's, or the thing that I just clicked on. So that is where I'm going to get that status. So it's going to be var record dot, and there's a status column in there somewhere. So that is what I'm using. So if var record dot status equals submitted, and, oh, I got to put it in quotes, and that manager approval box has something in it. So this is going to be called, what is this called? I'm going to give it a better name. So CMB for combo box, manager decision. There we go, CMB manager decision. So that is what I'm going to refer to. So I'm doing two pieces of logic in here. I'm not just going to say if the current status is already submitted, go ahead and change it to the next status. I'm going to look at two things. So if it equals submitted, and my logic for and in here is 2 ampersands. If the status is equal to submitted, and that combo box manager decision dot selected is dot value, since it's a choice column, is not blank. And one way you can do this is just to do not is blank. And if it's a list of things, it's going to be is empty. So sometimes I'll just try both of those and see which one works the best. I think this is just a single piece of text that they're selecting, so it's just going to be is blank. So if it's submitted and not is blank, then what I want to do, I want to say this, I'm going to put completed. So it's just one level of approval, very simple. Then put completed. Otherwise, just again, this is that whatever that default value is already in the box. So this is the name of this text box. So with this update property, it's always going to have, the update property is always just by default on all of your cards, it's going to say the name of the control inside of the card. So whatever's typed in that control is what gets into SharePoint. So what I'm doing here, and this is going to be the crux of the logic, is I'm looking at two pieces of logic and I'm telling it when it updates, when it sends the data to SharePoint, to look at these two pieces of logic. And if these two are the case, set it to completed. Otherwise, just leave it what it already was. And yes, not is blank can also be just an exclamation mark. And exclamation mark is the same thing as like the opposite of and not. Those can achieve the same thing. Good question, Jennifer. Okay, so now let me go to my list. And this North Carolina trip has a status of submitted, and I'm the manager. I'm going to go ahead and make a decision here. I'll say approved, and let's see what happens. Submit it, and I need to go ahead and just show the status in my gallery so that I can quickly see. I'll go ahead and insert my status. Some of them don't have it because that's a new column that I created, but look at that. So this one that I just did with the update column and the logic in the update, it worked. So it looked at those two pieces of logic, if the status was currently submitted, and it went ahead and the manager had done something, and it went ahead and did that and changed it to completed. So let's make sure that if I do a new one, it's not going to change it to completed. test, blah, 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 blah. Where I'm going to go, doesn't matter. And then, so this one says submitted. So now it's been submitted to the manager. And so now you can see this lights up. Now it's Garth's turn to go do something. I didn't do any logic depending on what he picks, but I just did the logic that changes it to completed as soon as he picks something. Okay, does that make sense? So it's that update property of the card is where you can do the logic that tells it to change the value of something according to whatever your condition happens to be. So then the other concepts that we're going to talk about, we have the default date plus days concept that Lisa was asking about. So Lisa, I think that you were saying you wanted just a date column to already have some today plus something in it. First of all, these little gray dates in here, nobody wants to see these. I'm going to get rid of them. The input text placeholder. Is that a big pet peeve of yours, that getting rid of that little input text? For the longest time in Power Apps, you couldn't get rid of that, and they finally made it so you can just go clear that out. Okay, so my travel start date, again, for this one, I don't want to mess with it if it's an existing item. I only want it to be a certain default if it's not new. If it is new. So let's see, where did my cursor go? The name of the form. This is whatever you've named your form control. Mode. I don't know why it's not lighting up. This is weird. It's like my little, let's see. Oh, that is odd. Look what it's doing. Let me fix it. Oh, I gotta unlock my card. It let me start typing in there without unlocking it, and then it got confused. Okay. So if FRM travel dot mode equals new, then I want to do today plus 2, and then otherwise I want to leave it whatever it already was. Okay, so today plus 2 is 422. Lisa, does that answer what you're asking about? Oh, and Lisa, I did leave the manager as editable, so I didn't make it read only. So technically they could go change that if they wanted to. It's just a people picker. Okay. So does that answer what you were asking? So that at least they start their travel date, whatever date column you have, it would default to today plus 2. And is that kind of the idea that you had when you were asking that? Let me see. So then I'll just wait and see what Lisa says, or see if you all have any other kind of date type of logic that you'd like to do. And the other big thing that we get a lot of requests for, and Chris has done this a ton, is to have some sort of ID, not just the default ID column, but have the ID of the item incorporated into some other column. Like, does your form need to have a requisition number, or does your form need to have like an order number, or something that you're actually going to use the ID of the item as part of? Because, every list and library in SharePoint automatically has that built-in ID column that automatically increments up for every item. But sometimes people need to have just like, it needs to say requisition, blah, 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 or it needs to have like additional characters along with it, whatever the ID is, or even sometimes it needs to add the ID to something. So I'll go ahead and show you how to do this logic. So when it comes to the ID, you're not going to have the ID. You're not going to know the ID until after it's been submitted. So we can't put the logic in that update property in that manner because you don't know the ID yet. So when this is the case, you need to go ahead and wait till after it's submitted and then patch to update that other record, that other column. So I went ahead and created a column called REQ, like requisition number, and that's what I'm going to be populating after the thing, after the thing has been submitted. Just immediately, it's just going to be as soon as it gets submitted, it's going to patch just. The way I do that is I need to go ahead and go to the on success of the form control. So my submit button just says submit form. That's all I'm doing. Then the logic that I want to do after the form is submitted, I do all of that in the on success. And I know you all have heard me talk about that concept. So I've got, it's setting that var record. I'm always setting the var record to whatever was last submitted. And then I'm navigating back to the list of items. Lisa says, can the update property be used to update a field in a different list? No, that's where you'd use the patch. So this patch that I'm about to show you is where you can patch to the same list if you need like the ID. And patch can also be used to patch to other lists if you need to go either create a record in another list or update a value in an existing item in another list. So that's patch is the key. So I'm going to set this var record. I'm going to navigate, and then I'm going to patch. So when I'm patching, I need to tell it which list I'm patching to, and I have to have that in my app as one of my data sources. And then which record do I want to patch? So in this case, my that thing that I last submitted, that var record that I've already captured. So I'm telling it which list, which record to patch to, and then what exactly am I patching? What fields am I patching? So for this, I need to have this syntax of the name of the column. In this case, it is req_num. Actually, I might have created that after I have to refresh my data here. Let me see. There it is. I just created that column right before we got started. Okay, so my requisition number, what do I want it to be? So this is where I can take and concatenate like whatever your syntax needs to be for your record. REQ. I'm just going to concatenate the word REQ. The ampersand is what concatenates it with the var record dot ID. Put a little space in here. And then close my curly brackets and close my patch. So this is going to take whatever the, again, that var record is very powerful because it has all the values of everything, all the fields of the thing that you just submitted, or in the case of that gallery, the thing you just clicked on. So that's what you can always refer to. So this is where it's going to patch that. So let me go ahead and try that out. Also, so right now this is going to patch just every single time somebody clicks submit. So it really, I mean, it really doesn't hurt, because even though after the very first time it's already going to have a value in there, it's not really going to make a difference. But for efficiency's sake, you could say to only do this if the requisition number is blank or something like that. But this is going to do it every time. So I'll go ahead and try that. Oops, let me do I'm going to open an existing one and try it. Close this, get this out of the way. And then I can't see it. I'm not showing the requisition number anywhere. So I'm going to do a couple of these. I'm just clicking submit. And then I can show it. Now, a couple of different ways I can show a piece of data is that I can display it. I can put it in a card on the form. I can just put requisition number. But another kind of fancy way that you might want to display a requisition number might be like up at the top. So I can even just insert a label and just put, make that white. And then for the text of this label, that's where I want to show the requisition number. So this is another way that you can display information from your form without having it take up all that space of having to be in a card, especially if it's just something that you want to be displayed. Ver record dot requisition number. What is this error that it's doing? Let's see. No, I don't need a dot. There we go. Let's see if it has. This one doesn't have one. Let me. So every time I click submit on one of these, it's actually writing. So there we go. So there's my requisition number. And if I go back to the list, every one of those that I clicked on and just re-clicked the submit button, those are all going to have that requisition number filled in. See, 10, 11, 13, 14. So that's taking the ID of the item and concatenating it and putting it on the end. So then I have it displayed up here. So like test Monday is requisition 10, requisition 11. So again, it's another way to just, that one doesn't have one yet. Las Vegas. Now it does. Pretty neat. Let's see. Oh, show where I created the var record again. Sure. So the var record is being set in a couple of places. For a new item, it's being set, well, every time an item gets submitted, somebody clicks submit, whether it's new or not, it's setting the var record to whatever the thing was that they just submitted. So it's like the name of the form control dot last submit. I'll just put that in the chat. And then for an existing item, when I'm on my gallery, I put the on select for the gallery is setting var record to this item. And in a gallery, this item is that whole row that I'm clicking on. So that's how you can do it from the gallery. So then when I'm coming from here and I click the row and I'm looking at it, then the next piece is for an existing item, not a new item. It needs to know your form will work perfectly fine without having something in the item property here for a bunch of new forms. But anytime you want to click on an existing item and be able to see that data in the form control, that's where I'm putting the item property as var record. So that's kind of all those pieces in place. So I don't know if that answers also the question earlier about maybe, I'm not sure, maybe it was, Jeffrey was asking about return, show an existing record after it's been updated. So maybe that answers your question as well. So that was the concept of after on success. So Lisa, to answer your question about patching like to another list, you would do patch and then the name of that other list. Like if I wanted this to create a task, I have a SharePoint list called tasks, and I wanted to create an item in that list, I could do that from here as well with another patch command. And I have to pull that other list into my app so that it's another data source here. But then I just tell it the name of the list. And then if it is a new record that I want it to create, I'm going to do, let's see, I'll just show you what that syntax looks like. Patch. If I want to create a new record, I'll just make this up. It would be the name, it would be defaults, and then the name of that same list that you just put right before it. And then you would tell it like title, blah, whatever, all the different columns that you want to fill in those in that curly bracket syntax. So if I ran this right now, it would create a brand new item in my travel request list with a title of blah, and there wouldn't be any other fields filled in unless they had default values. So yeah, that's how, again, there are a lot of things in Power Apps that you can do to replace things that we used to have to do in workflows, especially the old days in SharePoint Designer workflows. And again, these are also things that you can do that they happen immediately as opposed to having to wait for a flow. So if it's something really simple like an item needing to get updated or created, you don't need a flow. Or if you need to send an email, you don't need a flow. Let's see, why are you sending var_record.last_submit again for on success? Okay, so that is a good question. So when I have clicked submit and I need to, in this case, I'm setting var record right when I click submit, because then it takes that brand new record that I just filled in and that it sets that in the variable, because then in this example, I have to have the ID of the item I just created, and I have to use that. So if I didn't set the var record right when the form got submitted, then it might still have the ID of some, some other thing that I clicked on, maybe when I was clicking on an existing item or something. So it helps to have it, to have it be set. Also, when I need to refer to any values of the form that I just submitted somewhere else in my app, or doing something else in the app, once I click submit, this form does not have any values in these controls. They're empty. So once I click submit, this is all gone, and I can't ever refer to like this text box value, to get the number 44 out of it or something like that. So it also helps to refer to your var record after, if you ever need anything about that record after it was submitted, because then you can't refer to that data like in these little text boxes. Make sense? All right, another example we'll go over, this one's a little more complicated, is having, so let me reiterate real quick. So the concept of the approvals, you could just have, this could get more complicated. So this update property of the card for the status, you could have a lot of logic in here. You could say if the var record status equals, you could have something called first approval, then, and the first approver's, choice has been selected, then change it to second approval. And then if it's second approval and this other thing, then change it to third approval. And then, so you could have a whole bunch of logic and if statements in your update property for the status, if you need to change that status automatically based on just a lot of other things happening in the app. Lisa says, how do you patch a date field? You just put it in quotes. Yeah. Okay, so now that you can kind of see, this is the power of the main gist of this Power Hour, is this update property. And that's where you can put your logic to determine what data gets written to SharePoint. Okay, so then another idea, another common thing that we have, and I feel like I either wrote a blog post about this or did a Power Hour about it, is the concept of like a draft, a save draft versus submit. So then when we save draft, we want the status to be draft, and versus submit, then it's going to be submitted. So that's gonna, because sometimes if you have a really long form and that's got a lot of complexity in it, and people need to be able to just save it and not commit to those changes and not have it go to their manager yet, they just need to have a little bit of time to come back to it. If it's, got 60 fields on it or something like that, we'll go ahead and show you how to do that. So I'll insert another button here. And I'll call this one Save Draft. And then this one's going to be doing something a little bit different. On select, this one's going to be setting a variable. I'll just call it var draft. And I'll say set var, let's see, state. I'll call it the state. So that the state of this form is going to be like draft or submitted. Set the var state to draft. You could just make it a Boolean, but I'm going a little bit more complex. So then this one's setting the var state to draft, and then this button is going to, before it submits the form, it's going to set var state to submit. So I've got submit and draft are the two different options here. Okay, there we go. Took a second to light up. Okay. And then, so then I'm going to have something in the variable. So then I can do logic in my form based on something being in the variable. So once somebody clicks this button, then they're going away. They're going to be navigated somewhere else. So after they click the button, then in the on success of this form is where I can then look at the value of that variable and do different logic according to that variable. So if, now where's the other place that I had the status being set? I think I had a default, yeah. I had this default property of this status, and I'm actually going to get rid of that. This is different logic that I had done to set something to say submitted, and I don't want to confuse that with this new thing that I'm doing with draft versus submit. So I'm getting rid of what I had earlier for that other example so that they're not conflicting. So in my on success, this is where I'm then going to look at that status, and let's see, if var state equals draft, then I'm going to, again, I can patch this thing. Now, if I'm doing two different patches, like I'm just going to comment this one out. If I'm doing two, I'm not going to be doing two different patches in a row to patch to the same record because that's pretty inefficient. So I'd probably just want to have a patch that sets both fields. So again, this is one of those things where I'm doing a completely separate example, and I'm going to comment out this other example that I was doing just so that I'm not doing anything that's conflicting. So that's what I'm trying to do, all these very simple examples in this power hour of different ways that you can go about it. So that's why and some of them kind of cancel each other out. Let's see. How about if one user is modifying one item in var record and not updated in the list yet, another person modified at the same time? No, var record doesn't work that way. So var record is not going to be like two different users using the app having different var records. Var record, any variables that you have are based on you and your session, your interaction with the Power App in that moment. So var record does not apply. It's not data that's being saved to the Power App at all, and it's not data that affects any other users. It's just temporary for that one user in that moment. Yeah, so this, you're right, Lisa. So Lisa brings up a good point. So the reason I was trying to say to go ahead and use the update property, that's a good way to do the logic to determine what's going to be changed, is that then it's all getting submitted at the same time. So that's one of the negatives to this patching, is that then the thing gets submitted and then it's immediately editing the same record. And so Lisa's had issues with an e-tag mismatch and the data not getting updated. There could be a timing issue or something like that. So that's why if you can, then you go ahead and put it as the update property. So one thing that I could do is I can say if var state equals draft, then patch this same record to have a status of draft. And then I can say otherwise patch it to have a status of submitted. So, but if we wanted to avoid that, then I can't have them clicking a button and having it take them somewhere else and then doing it after the fact, like I'm doing here. So if I wanted to achieve that concept of having just using the update property and still giving the person the ability to change from draft to submit, then that would be a good case for adding a drop down for them. Or a radio button where they're deciding whether they want it to put in draft state or not. So then that way, when you're doing the update property, it can look at the value of that toggle, the radio button or the drop down, and then just do it as part of the update instead of waiting till after. Because if you wait till after they've submitted, then you're having to patch, and then like Lisa said, you're going to risk that e-tag mismatch. So this is where it kind of gets to the more complicated part of Power Hour, where we deal with issues and more complexity. So what I'm going to do is I'll go ahead and implement, instead of having two buttons, I'll show you how you can do it like that. And so in that case, I'll go ahead and create a state column in SharePoint and just have that be another card here instead of having two different buttons. Because that way then we'll be able to know the data and know the information about whether they're just saving it as a draft before they've clicked the submit button. So it's all about the timing. Does that make sense? Okay, so let me go ahead and go to my list, and I'll go ahead and create a new column. And I'm just gonna, I kind of just want to make this a single line of text. I'll go ahead and just make it a choice field, make it a little more simple. So I'll call it state. And then this way, instead of clicking a button and setting a variable to var state, that would be one option. I'm just going to have them interact with a drop-down box and pick the state there. So this is going to be draft versus submit. And no default value. Okay. Okay, and then once I change a column in the SharePoint list, I need to go ahead and refresh it here. So best practice is, if you can, do it in the update property, but if you need to do it based on like the ID or based on something after it's been submitted, then you can do the patch, but then you're going to risk doing the e tag. So Lisa says, if the form generates an email, how would you prevent email being sent on draft? So again, it's another place where you could do your logic in the on success, because then you're going to have that data in the var record telling you whether it's a draft or not. So that's a piece of logic you can use. So let me go ahead and get rid of this button and add my field of, I call it state. I'm not sure why that's got an error on it already. I just added it. Let me see. That is weird that it hasn't. I literally just added this thing and it's already got an error, but it won't tell me what the, let me just unlock it. It won't tell me what the error is. Default this item dot state. I don't know. That is odd to have it already having an error. Let me just save this. Okay, let me try and fill one of these in and just see if it saves correctly. So test. Okay. No, it didn't save it. Oh, that is weird. That is weird. I just created a column and then immediately put the card on here and it didn't even work. Maybe it doesn't like the name state or something like that. Maybe I need to change it. Maybe state is, maybe it's got something weird going on, like state is a system. Oh, look, it put it here. It put it as draft. So it saved my data. It just didn't show it in the form. Okay. All right. Let me add, I'm just going to add it back. You never know what's going to happen in Power Hour. Okay, state. All right. And then its default is this item dot state. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I've never seen that happen before. I'm not sure why it's acting like it's not, doesn't have a value in it. Okay, so what I'd have to do though is I have this drop down box and I'm gonna call it CMB for, it's a combo box, state. And then I need to refer to that value. So then when I'm changing my status, basically I need whatever logic I need to do differently based on if something's a draft, then that's the drop down box that I can refer to. So like something commonly that you might want to do when something is a draft versus published is, like Lisa said, send an email to somebody, only, not published, submitted. Send an email only if the draft is submitted. So it'd be varrecord.state equals draft, or varrecord.state is not equal to draft, then send the email. Another thing that's common is the required fields. So if you set something as draft, maybe you don't want all the fields to be required if it's draft, but then if they're submitting it final, then you want the fields to be required. So let's go do that. So I'm going to say destination. I've already got that as a required field, but required is another piece of data. It's another property on the card itself. So every card has a required property, and it's going to be locked by default. You have to unlock the whole card to be able to put a formula in here. But what I would do is say if CMB state dot selected dot value equals draft, then false, otherwise true. Or I could say cmb.selected.value equals submitted, then it would be true. So only if, or submit, only if I'm submitting it, then I want this to be required. So let's see if I change this from to draft. So look, see, I changed it to draft and it's not required. See, the asterisk went away, and then when I change it to submit, then it is required. So that is what you're going to allow people to be able to fill in a bunch of fields on the form and not have to commit to all those required fields just yet if it's just a draft version. So then I can do that same logic if I want to, this same exact logic on all of my cards. I can just copy and paste this, or I could even refer to this. So this is my reason for travel data card 1 is what that control is called. I can just say, go to the required property for some other control and just set it to reason for travel data card 1 dot required. And then that way, just whatever this required property is, this one's going to be too. So then I can just refer to that other card and just, it's kind of the same concept as copying the logic across. All right, so then let's do that again. I change it to draft. And look at that, those two asterisks go away, and then submit. So the kind of a pain about that is that if you have a form with like 60 different controls on it, then you'd have to go to the required property for every single one of them and put that logic in there. But it does give you the benefit of allowing people to have a draft version of something. So the first thing that I was trying to show you was the concept of having two different buttons, and then having the two different buttons set a variable. And then on success, based on what the value of the variable is, you could set, patch to set other field properties or field values. But then if you have this concept of just going ahead and creating a dropdown for draft versus submit, then you already have the data in there, and you don't have to worry about waiting till after it's being submitted to patch and risk that sort of data mismatch that you might get. Maybe if it's a slower connection, or if there's a bunch of data that's being submitted, that there's a timing issue in there. Okay, what do you all think? Any other? So I think I answered all of your questions. That bigger monitor is helping with kind of having a lot going on and being able to see the feed and then see all the questions and do the demo. So thank you all for joining. Let's see, next week, let me go to my schedule. I'll have to go get rid of that. Next week is our live online class, and feel free to sign up for that. You learn all the deep dive and hang out with me for 5 days online and learn advanced Power Apps and Power Automate. So I'm not having Power Hour next week, and then May 4th is the next Power Hour. So yeah, thanks everybody for coming. Let me switch back over. Okay, well, it was good. It was good, lively chat. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it. And Sign up for the newsletter if you haven't yet, and I will see you all next time. Check out iwmentor.com. Bye, over and out.